When you spend a long day in the saddle, you may start to notice that you get tension in through your back and in towards your hips. So the next 5 poses we're going to look at help to address these areas and keep you limber and able to fold forward onto your bike. The first pose we're going to do is a combination of cat-cow, a dolphin prep, as well as a puppy pose. So for these poses, you're going to want to come into a table position on your mat, hands shoulder width apart, fingers spread apart. Let your shoulder blades soften onto your back, melt towards the floor. On an inhale breath, look up towards the ceiling, arching through your spine, and then exhale, round your back, and then look up in towards your belly. Okay. Inhale, looking up towards the sky ceiling, and then exhale, rounding in towards your back. This is obviously the cat, and then inhale, looking up, and this is the cow, because you let your belly hang towards the earth. And then from there, back into neutral. The dolphin variation, you bring your forearms down onto the floor. You can either keep your hands shoulder width apart, or you can interlace your fingers, especially if you're a little bit tighter in through your shoulders. And now in this position, keeping your hands rooted down to the mat, your elbows slightly hugged in towards one another, start to push your hips back and then move your hips down towards your heels on the floor. This is a nice one to move with your breath. Inhale, coming forward slightly, and then exhale, extending back, letting your sit bones, pelvic floor lead the way. Let's do that one more time. Inhale, coming slightly forward. That's it. And then exhale, pressing back, releasing between your shoulders. The third variation you can do is a puppy pose. Stay in this position, only walk your hands a little bit further forward. Maybe even come onto your fingertips, making little tents with your hands. Press down into your hands, and then let your shoulders melt towards the floor. This is one that you're going to want to do with a neutral neck. It's a great release, all the way from fingertips down to your pelvic floor. And then you can come back out. The next pose that we're going to do is a modification of suntan pose at the beach. It's called Sphinx Pose. For this one, you're going to want to come and lie down onto your belly, keeping your feet about hip width apart. Elbows come directly below your shoulders, and then fingers spread apart, forearms parallel onto the mat. Hug your elbows slightly in towards each other. Keep your chin tucked to start off with. Draw your shoulder blades in towards your back, and then now start to lift your heart and chest up, and then gradually start to lift your head up so that you're keeping no crease in the back of your neck as you take the gaze forward, or maybe even slightly up towards the ceiling. You want to feel like you're pulling the center of your chest forward towards the front as you let your shoulders soften down in towards your back. And you can stay here for several breaths. If you're really mobile, what you may want to do is what Jesse's doing here, which is the Superman variation, or woman, or a person. Hands come in front on your fingertips, press into your hands, and then rise up off the floor once again. This is just a little bit of a deeper variation. And then you can come back out. The next pose we're going to do is Cobra, or Bhujangasana pose. For this one, you're going to want to place your hands underneath your shoulders on the floor. So coming back down, keeping your inner legs hugged slightly towards one another, gluing your feet down on the floor. You want to lead with your pelvis, so draw your tailbone towards the heels, draw your shoulders up and then in towards your back and start to press into the floor as you lift your upper body up off the floor. Now, depending on your mobility, you may want to stay closer to the floor. You may want to come up a little higher, or you may even want to come on your fingertips to press in towards the floor, staying active in your arms. One of the things that you don't want to do in this pose is fall in the trap of straightening your arms, shoulders coming forward, and cranking back into your neck, which doesn't look great, even if you're Jesse. And then you can come on back down. The next pose we're going to do is going to help to open up through your low back, heart, chest, as well as your hips. It's a variation of Sucirandhrasana. For this one, you're going to come seated on your mat. Bring your hands behind you on the mat. You can do variations from fingers pointing back to forward or the side, whatever feels most comfortable for you. Let your shoulders come up and then in towards your back, and then bring your feet onto the floor, keeping a little bit of a bend in your knees. Now in this pose here, you want to roll to the top of your pelvis so that your heart and chest is coming forward, pressing down through your hands on the mat and then opening up through your heart. Now you can simply stay here, or if you want to go a little bit deeper to open through your hips, straighten back out through your legs, take your right foot and place it on the left leg so that you're flexing and pointing the foot at the same time. That's flointing. And then you can either keep your leg on the floor flat, you can bend your knee, or if you're a professional like Jesse, you can bring it even closer towards your hip. Now in this position, let your sit bones root down towards the floor. press through the sit bones and then lengthen up through your spine, letting your upper body lean back, hips and your right knee melting towards the floor. Just hold this for a few breaths and do the same thing on the other side. Come on back out. The next pose we're going to do is a great releasing pose. It's a reclining spine twist, and we're going to show you 3 different variations so you can do the one that feels best in your body. In this posture here, you're going to want to bring your hands up into a cactus position, whether you're doing what Adeline's doing, which is to take your left knee lifted up, or right knee lifted up, and then cross it over, bringing your left hand onto the right knee. Or like Nicole, we're bringing your shins up. Just keep both legs together, bring them towards the floor. Or like Jesse, as you bring your legs up, cross your right foot over your left leg, and then bring your knees down over towards the left side of the mat. And maybe also taking your left hand and bring it onto your knee. This is a great pose to hold for several breaths. If you're having trouble keeping your shoulder or your wrist on the floor, you can slightly widen your hand out to the side. You want to keep an arch in your back, so pressing your hips back and then opening through your heart and chest, and then finally taking your gaze and looking over towards your right hand on the floor. When you feel like you can melt no more, it's a great time to slowly come back up and go ahead and do the other side. The last pose we're going to do is a pigeon prep pose, which is a great way to open through your hips as well as relax from head to toe through your spine. To come into this pose, you're going to want to start in a downward dog position, so pressing your hips up and back behind you. Take your right leg, lift it towards the sky, and then place your right knee right up beside your right wrist, depending on your mobility, and then walking your left leg back behind you. You either want to keep your shin, depending on your mobility, tucked a little bit more in towards your leg, or you can also bring it further forward on your mat. The more you come forward, the deeper it goes. Notice how they're all starting lifting up towards the mat. You can stay in this position, or if it's more comfortable and relaxing, bow down forward towards the floor, maybe placing your elbows on the floor, resting your head perhaps on your hands or a block, and letting your spine melt towards the floor. A couple things you want to be aware of in this pose is there's a squaring action in the pose. You want your whole front leg hip to be drawing back towards the back of your mat, and the back leg hip rooting and coming forward, making sure your hips aren't falling one side or the other excessively, balanced. Pelvis tilting forward and then lengthening all the way out through your spine. As long as you're not getting any knee pain, which if you are, you can bring your foot a little closer in, point your toes back more. You can stay in this pose for quite a few breaths. When you feel like you're at the perfect point between relaxation, surrender, and just enough, it's a great time to come on back up and go ahead and do the other side. While there are literally thousands of yoga poses you can do, these are the top 5 poses that I find benefit me in my cycling.